What up, y'all? It's Golden Spaces, an Odyssey original podcast with Justin and Nat. To all of my 49ers fans on here, my mutuals from Twitter, anybody who follows me, I know many of you know that I'm an Eagles fan. Congrats. Y'all got us. Y'all got the Eagles. Yes, it was an embarrassing loss. Blah, 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 all the things. And I don't give a fuck. You didn't win the Super Bowl tonight. You didn't win the NFC Championship. All right. Like, ain't shit happened, but y'all got some little, bragging rights for a game that ultimately doesn't mean much unless you come back and do it again in the NFC Championship, likely in Philly, because it's going to run through us. So take your little celebrations now, pop off now, talk your shit to me now, because the only thing you're going to be celebrating is this game. Okay. That being said, let's move on to Warriors. What? Justin, why you laughing at me?
Had to get that off. Wow.
I had to get that off. Y'all know I love y'all. And to the people who are Raiders fans, I know y'all with me because y'all don't even like the 49ers. So see, that's what's good. That it's not the whole Bay that's against me, because there's like within the Bay a division,
Well, I'm a Commanders fan, so I'm with the Niners on this one. So
of course, you're an ass. Like you Chiefs.
I got to.
And
no, I ain't never. Yeah. Against the Eagles.
You're whack for that. I don't see how any black man is not supporting Jalen Hurts.
Oh, here we go.
That's all I'm saying.
That's crazy.
Come on, do you see the fits? Like, my God.
Come on, man. He played for the Eagles. Mahomes. He plays for the Eagles. I never liked the Eagles, never in my life. So whoever they
play, like the Eagles to like Patrick Mahomes. He's to like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is a very likable guy.
I'm not anti-Jalen Hurts. I'm anti-Eagles. So
okay, but if you're anti-Jalen Hurts, if you're anti-Eagles, I'm just saying it's nasty business to be pro Patrick Mahomes and anti-Jalen Hurts. It just doesn't seem right.
What? Hey, they happen to meet each other in the Super Bowl, so
I'm just saying it feels anti-black.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's crazy.
Wow. People, please do not take me seriously. Next thing you know, they're going to click this and be like, she was trying to say Patrick Mahomes. It's a joke, okay? But it's a little racist. It's a little anti-black.
Oh, man.
Listen, y'all, we got to have laughter because the Warriors are warrioring. Not in a good way, bro. Yo, I'm tired of them, man. This feels like last season. And the thing about it, Justin, is that I know this team is better than last season. In fact, I think this team is actually more on par with the 2022 Warriors that won.
Yeah.
And I'll die on that hill. I will. I'll die on that hill. Same. And honestly, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from having to explain this on Twitter and people, it's like, and I just don't understand why people always make these like rules and why everything has to be black and white. Why can't we just have nuance? Like, why can't we just have nuance? Like, why is that such a hard thing to do? Not Justin, not me. There's no one who right now is going to say that the Warriors are playing great or anything like that. But for one, I just need y'all to stop assessing the Warriors like they are whole. When they start losing, when things happen, y'all act like nothing changed. Y'all act like they just started losing. They went from winning to losing, and nothing happened that contributed to the losses. And this is not done with any other team, right? By Warriors fans. I'm not talking about the outsiders, because the outsiders are going to hate. But Warriors fans are now talking about their easy schedule to begin the season. Bro, what are you talking about? The Warriors had, depending on which app or which site you use, had either the first or second hardest strength of schedule to start the season.
Right. Facts.
Like, what are we even doing here? They all the teams were missing their best player. So when the Warriors now shift to a homestand and lose Draymond for the bulk of it, and on top of that, lose Steph for 2 games while Draymond is suspended.
Right.
That doesn't matter, though. That doesn't matter. Only when we go places and they're missing their players, right? Honestly, this is analogous to the Eagles and Niners because all I hear about is the players they were missing. But it's like the Eagles have been missing players all season, right? But I'm just saying, okay. But let's keep it with NBA. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't understand. Why does that not apply the other way? You know? And I'm like, this is what I'm trying to say. Do y'all realize how much this is like 2022? The difference is in 2022, the winning went on a little bit longer for them to have padding. But y'all questioned the wins in 2022 as well. Yeah. And that's why I had a tweet the other day that said, the Warriors being a 500 team is not new. It's been like this the last 3 years. The only difference in 2022 is they stacked some wins at the beginning that it carried them to the end of the season. But the moment they had injuries and players went down, they were a 500 team. Because someone tried to tell me, oh, they were still winning. No, the fuck they were not. In fact, they went on extended losing streaks.
Yeah, they did.
So
once they lost Draymond, they were pretty much 500 or even below 500 from that point on. The rest of the season, they were just like 24 and like 8 at that point. Like they were pretty far ahead in the win column. So
exactly,
they could afford to be mid for the rest of the season. And then they got healthy going into the playoffs and whole, and then it just worked out from there.
And someone said they just regress to the mean. I said, do y'all really think that 6 losses in a row at home is their mean? Is that what you really think? Like, Be serious. Like, I can't have serious conversations with people when you're saying stuff like that to me. Like when we say, someone tried to say, this is why we're saying they're not a championship team because championship teams don't have slim margins for errors. I said, bullshit. In 2022, they had a slim margin for error. Things just worked out in their favor. Yeah. And to be quite frank, the Warriors always this is to tell you how great Steph was in 2016, but in 2015, but it wasn't just Steph. Clay and Dre were better players then. And that's really the difference because Steph is still really good, but they always lacked a shot creator then, which is why, when I'm like debating with people, they're just like, you can't win without a second shot creator. I'm like, okay, but the Warriors did in 2015. They didn't just do it. And I said, arguably, they did it in 2022 as well, because they had Jordan, but after that first series, Jordan wasn't as impactful anymore. And by the finals, it was Steph and it was Wiggs. So again, I'm not saying that that's great. Like, we all know having that second shot creator is important and needed, and we want them to have it. But my point is that they've actually done it more than once without having that. And yes, a lot of things have to go their way. Like when you win a championship, you have to have luck. You do. We know that. But it's not impossible for them to win. But Justin has stated it. I have stated it. Their margin for error is thin. They are not a team that has the luxury of having their second most important player miss games, also having their best player out for a couple of games, having their other 2 scorers struggle at the same time, and still win. And yet they've still been in most of those games, Justin.
Yeah. I mean, like, people looking at their record from a macro sense, like we just broke it down. They had a really tough schedule and all type of stuff. And, all that has to be taken into account. But even on a micro level, on a game by game basis, every loss hasn't been the same, despite what people were saying. Like the Kings loss and the Clippers loss, very different, even though they both blew. Even though they blew a lead. Yeah, 2 leads were given up. You look at the Kings,
and that's how the team looks at it. You heard their comments after the game, right? They look at those and then people differently.
And people are reacting to it like, oh, they're so arrogant. This is why they're not going to be good and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, no, if you actually just pay attention to what happened in both games, they're probably correct, right? You look at the Kings game, And that was just disaster moment after disaster moment. Draymond gets a tech. He fouls for no reason. Steph, crazy turnovers. Like, these are just huge blunders by their players. When you look at the Clippers game, it was like, okay, Dario probably can't guard Harden. So they overcompensate for Dario and guys get an open shot. It's like little things over the course of that game. But Jimsky just couldn't guard Harden for like a two-minute stretch, which is kind
I
of to
think
be
you have
expected.
Andrew Wiggins in that game and they win.
Right. Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's the thing.
or even if they play Kuminga more than Pods, like, I think there's a good chance that you can win because you have a better athlete on their athletes. It was little micro things over the course of that entire second half that led to them chipping away at the lead. And the Warriors' process was fine. They were getting good shots. They just missed them. I remember Draymond and Steph both had an easy putback and both just missed a putback. So you look at that game and it's like they played
It
pretty
wasn't
well.
being unserious. It wasn't just
Yeah.
blunders. It wasn't.
Yeah. And the Clippers were hitting tough shots, like Paul George for the game, between the legs, step back three for the game. It's like, all right.
They definitely had some fouls not being called.
Yeah. Before we started this, I was watching the game back, and like the moving screen is the worst, is the most messed up call in the NBA today. Like, they decide when they want to call it and when they don't. It's actually ridiculous. But yeah, that loss was not the same, even close to the Kings loss. And people just, it's like you just said, it's no nuance. It's just all black and white. Either they suck or we're going to the championship or something like that.
And my favorite now, good teams don't blow 20-point lead. Yes, they do, all the fucking time. All the time. And
Yeah.
even if they pull out the win, they blow them.
Right.
They blow them.
Thunder just gave up a 30-0 run.
30-0. Like, they do it all the time. That's what I'm just saying. But because they won and the outcome worked out, then it was just like, oh yeah, see, they still found a way to win. Yeah, okay. Well, they did. But that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, a lot of that comes down to luck as well. And I mean, I don't want it. I mean, some people are gonna take this and run with it and say, "Oh, we're just making excuses for the team, whatever." Like, I mean, just add nuance, just add context to the situation. Things aren't all, like they always say, things are never as good as they seem, and things are never as bad as they seem. But for some reason, when people assess this team, it's one or the other. It's hot, it's super hot or super cold, and it's like they're not the worst team in the world. They're not playing championship level basketball right now. That's obvious. But to just act like the season's over after 20 games, like, all right, come on. Let's just
and to act like there's no potential there. Like,
right.
To me, you've seen it. You've seen the signs and you've seen the markers. Like, I'm still just going to keep harping on the fact that this bench on multiple occasions has shown you the ability to score in double digits.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple guys from the bench. Pods, Moody, Kuminga, Dario. They've all done it on multiple occasions. They've won non-Steph minutes. They've pushed leads. Like, I don't see how people, like, that already in itself is a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's
over last year.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's important. Like, we just can't have Clay and Wiggs struggling at the same time for extended periods of time. Like, and that's why I try to point out to people, like, in the beginning of the year, Clay was playing well. They won those games, right? But then they came home, they lost Dre, Clay was struggling, and Andrew's struggles continued, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now Andrew gets it together, it looks like, and then, and people are mad at him for jamming his finger in the door. Like, how many times have y'all had accident? Like, shit happens. Like, he didn't do it intentionally.
Right.
And he tried to play. He wanted to play. Like, it was just clear he couldn't. But I mean, it sucks. But bro, like, I've slammed my finger, my toe thing. Like, people do that all the time. It's just an accident.
Yeah, stuff like that happens. They still have enough to win these games. And they were in, I mean, had a hefty lead in this game. And this, people, I think, naturally are going to just be more on the side of pessimism, because you can look at it one way and say, well, they blew a 20-point lead, but you can also say, well, they got a 22-point lead somehow.
Well, that's what I said. I said, you don't get a lead like that if you're just not good. And so then people want to put up screenshots of the Portland Trailblazers being up 20 on the Bucks. Like, okay, whatever.
I mean, people keep bringing up other teams. I don't know why they do that. Like we're discussing this team. I don't care. I don't understand why people bring up other teams when you're
But
talking
that
about
also
this.
doesn't make your point. It's
Right.
like the Clippers have talented players on their team. Okay.
Mhm.
They have talented players on their team. And I agree, generally speaking, that they have enough to win these games. The Clippers are in a unique spot because they're still trying to figure shit out, right? But again, I know I'm like in the minority, but I'm still not one of those people who just thinks like Clippers are done, they're ass for the year, and that's it. I think they're trying to figure shit out with the addition of James Harden. That being said, I hated that Wiggs was going to be injured, like not going to be injured. I hated that Wiggs was going to be out because like this is a team that you need wings for, athletic wings. And I was like, it just sucks not to have him. So I agree that they could still beat them, but I do think it's a disadvantage not having him, even as good as like Kuminga was playing. And so it's just like, whatever, bro. It sucks, but I wish they would have won that game. I think they could have won that game. They didn't win that game, but I just want them to get back over to 500 and like reel off like a few wins.
Mhm.
And I'm also just annoyed because I feel like when Andrew comes back now, I don't know how soon his, you know, finger or whatever. So I'm like, are we gonna have to now go through another like he has to,
Mhm.
get back again? So it's frustrating.
Yeah. Hopefully it's something that doesn't linger and, affects his jump shooting and stuff even more. And, it's just a matter of him getting right mentally and filling in that role that they need him to fill in. But yeah, I think they're in a position now to, string together some games because they got huge gaps in between these next few games. Whether they're on the road or at home, they have like 2-3 day gaps in between
Yeah.
a lot of these games. So they should be able to go into each game with a solid game plan, get a lot of practice time in, and put their best foot forward and their best product on the floor. And hopefully they can just do it for 48 minutes. But Steve is going to have to allow for that to happen, and
Yeah,
we'll
let's
see.
talk about that. Let's talk about that because I personally rolled my eyes when he did the heel turn and said, "Yeah, man, I went back and looked and I really shouldn't have pulled Moses out then and, you know, just not good coaching on my part." No shit, Steve, no shit. You
He
know?
does that all the time.
All the
It's so
time. And that's what I'm telling people. They're like, "Well, at least I don't think we've ever seen him own it." I said, "What? What?
he
He's the
owns it every
king.
time. It's just like, bruh, all right, we
He's the
tired of
king of
you.
saying, yeah, that wasn't good. I didn't put them in a position to succeed." All the same shit to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then making the same mistakes over and over. It's like with him. With Steve, the thing about him that I cannot to this day comprehend and why you're never going to sell me on him is that he does this thing of like, you played well, so I'm going to reward you, which I understand. But he takes it to an extreme versus like, yes, I get it. Pods has been playing well, but like, he's not the fucking right
And,
matchup, bro. The fucking
and
wing who also played well is the one who needs to be out there. Jonathan fucking Kuminga.
and what's
Jonathan
crazy
fucking Kuminga. It's the
and
same
what's
reason you sat Moody. Well, the vets, they've won things for us. And
mhm.
who cares? You're trying to win this goddamn game right now. And Moses Moody is shooting 100 from the goddamn field. Keep him in the fucking game.
But the funny thing is, what did he say after the last Clippers game? This is the best game Jonathan Kuminga played all season. How do you reward him?
By benching
16
him.
minutes. 16 minutes the next game and 37 for pods. And this is not an anti-pods thing. It's like
We
understand
love
what
pods.
matchups makes. Yeah, we love pods. Just understand what matchups makes the most sense. 6'4 pods, rookie, guarding James Harden when he's hot. Like he got it going in the third quarter. It was like 1 or 2 or 3 possessions in a row where it was just nothing Pods can do with them, and he's just generating points, whether he's kicking it out or scoring himself. It's like, okay, you just praised Jonathan Kuminga for how good he's been, how good he played. He didn't foul guys. He
No
he had 0
fouls.
fouls last game. Like, put him on James Harden. He's a 6'8" freak athlete that can stay in front of Harden and make him take those contested step backs that he
Right.
wants to take. But
And he's not
Steve,
shooting that well.
and he wasn't shooting that well. Like, but Steve is just like, nah, I'm gonna just keep Pod. Like, Pods is just our new guy, 40 minutes guy. it's like, bro, it's a little bit too much for him, man. Like, let's just keep it real. Good player, like love
But it's
pods, but
also like just not the
matchups,
right matchup. It's not the
matchups,
right
like,
matchup.
and we
Why
saw
is he
early
so
on.
incapable of seeing that in game?
I don't know. He
Because he's not good. Say it
no,
with
no,
me.
no, no. He used to
Say it with
be.
me. Say it with me. Say it with me.
He's lost it. He's lost it a little bit because even
How
beyond
do you
pods,
lose the ability to stop being good with your
I don't
mind?
know.
Because this is not a physical thing.
That's what's so confusing.
This
That's
is
what's. I
not a
mean,
physical thing. I
the mind
understand
can.
how players stop being good because their physical abilities change. But how does your brain is actually supposed to get smarter with age until you're just like old and shit. Like old.
I mean,
But he's not at that age. It was
but
never
yes,
there.
you are
It was
correct.
never
You're
there.
correct. But beyond pods, the Dario and the Clippers themselves have one big. Everybody else is wing sized. So there was points in the game where Dario was on the court, and whether there's like a Tice or something in, and they're just putting Dario in the pick and roll, and he has to like they're panicking because it's like we cannot switch him on a Kawhi, we cannot switch him on a Harden, we cannot switch him on a
Right.
Paul George, so they're trying to overcompensate, and one of the other two is just wide open shooting the catch and shoot three, and it's like, okay, Steve, how about you put just 5 wings out there since they got 5 wings out there? Where's Kuminga at? Where's Moody was out there, but like, where's Kuminga at? Like, just put him on the court so he can guard somebody. You need mobility on the court to guard this team. And he kept Dario out there for too long. He kept Pods out there for too long. It compromised their defense. He kept Corey Joseph out there
Because
for too long.
Dario's a vet, and that's who he feels safe with. And that's what I'm saying. This kind of shit has to fucking end. It has to end. You know? I took Moses out. I took Moody out. I still can't believe he said that, because he made it seem like their goal of winning can't be accomplished unless the vets play. That's dumb. That's dumb.
Very. It's getting to a point where there's a key stretch in every game where he just completely loses it coaching wise. Like, he'll just be pretty good for like 35 out of the 48 minutes. And that 13 minutes where he's just completely off his head playing the wrong lineup is where they lose the game.
I don't even feel like he's pretty good. I just feel like the team is performing well and they're up big, so it's okay. But like anything, especially if there's another good coach on the other side, especially if there's good players on the other side, and we know the Clippers are desperate, teams adjust, or they start to play defense, or they start to whatever. The Clippers weren't trying to lose another game. They desperately needed a win. And you cannot counter. Like, once he starts with something and it's working successfully, he does not know how to change it up in the moment, in the game. It's always a fucking realization after the fact. And then he realizes the shit after the fact and still doesn't change it properly for the next goddamn game. Only Pods can be rewarded. And you know why Pods is the only one who can be rewarded. Because he's a Kerr guy. He's the kind of player Kerr likes.
Yeah.
Which is fucking stupid.
It is. It is. I mean, that decision ultimately cost him the game, in my opinion. Like I said, I was just watching the game back before we came back on here. They had the game pretty much in complete control until the 5-minute mark of the third quarter, and that's where Harden started to cook. And then Kerr should have been immediately like, okay, timeout, Pods, you've been hooping, but we got to get some more length onto Harden. Like, Dario, you've been hooping, but we got to get some more mobility on the back end to rotate. We can't just completely compromise our defense trying to hide you, right? But he didn't do that. And I mean, even Loon to a certain extent, and this is kind of what I was alluding to last pod about how Loon has to regain what he was before. His mobility has been an issue, right? Like, there's been multiple plays of that game where he's just getting beat down the court, and that's just.
Well, what do you think this is with Loon? Because I mean, people are like, maybe he's just like falling off, and I'm like, I get Loon was always a little, but I'm just like, it was just last year. So is this a conditioning thing that he didn't come in conditioned? What are you seeing? What do you think it is?
I mean, he looks out of shape. He just looks a step slow. Why that is, I'm not entirely sure, right? It could be just a fatigue from playing so many games over the last 2-3 seasons in a row. Maybe, he didn't take his conditioning like to heart over the summer. Maybe he was just traveling a lot. I know he had the China trip with Clay
I
for
feel
Anta.
I was seeing pictures of Loon working out like on the desert or just doing like some weird, crazy
Sure.
where the beach it was maybe.
Yeah, I don't think he completely did nothing, but like if you look at him, he's just moving really, really slow, and he looks kind of chubby in his jersey. I'm not gonna lie, like you can kind of see
Oh
his
yeah?
stomach through the jersey. Yeah, you can see his stomach through the jersey. I'm not trying to like put him out
I
there,
gotta
but
look closer.
yeah, he just looks a little bit sluggish, right? So he got to get his mobility back because that's what part of the reason what made him such a dynamic player for them because he can guard every position pretty much. Now he's struggling to guard his own position unless it's like a bruiser big like Sabonis that's just going to try to back you down. He can guard those guys well. You know, he guarded Jokic earlier this season better than he's ever have, but it's a trade-off apparently. Like he lost the ability to switch. He gets beat in transition kind of often, can't close out as fast. You know, like he doesn't really get blocks anymore because he can't get to the ball fast enough. So he's got to get that in order. And I mean, in the meantime, if Kerr can just play Trayce, that can add another dynamic to this team.
And that I was gonna say that earlier. Like, why doesn't he know that he can utilize Trayce for some of these matchups?
I have no clue. He's doing it. He's done it with pods. Like, why not? Why not try Trayce? You know, like he's a good player. You know, and he just adds something different. The same way Pods is unlike every other player pretty much on his roster. So is Trayce, right? He's the only big that can play above the rim on offense and defense. He's a shot blocker. He runs the floor. He can catch lobs. He will dunk on the other team's center, right? I'm pretty sure Steph and Draymond would very much appreciate having a guy who can just catch a lob and dunk it, like so they don't have to work extra hard to get a bucket.
They really needed to have won that game yesterday because they have Portland, then they got OKC away, and then they have they're basically after Portland, their next game home. They got 3 games away. I mean, we know they can win on the road this year, but it's OKC, Phoenix. Neither of those, I mean, none of the games will be easy, and Clippers, you know? So, um,
Yeah.
they just sort of put themselves into a difficult position. And I say put themselves because when Draymond chooses to get himself suspended, you're choosing that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like to me, a lot of this shit is self-inflicted, you know?
Most definitely. And
So it's unfortunate.
very, I mean, and when you lose 2 games out of your last 4 by 1 point a piece, that makes it even more. It's like, damn, this could be a 4-game win streak.
Right.
If they win those 2 games, they take care of business, win those games. Then you go into Portland, that's likely 5-game win streak, and now you're looking at your record being, well over 500 at that point. But I mean, I don't know, but I got a good feeling about how they're trending going forward because I think they're refinding that identity of ball movement, pace, control, chaos, stuff like that. They definitely played like that these last 2 games against the Clippers. Now, granted, the Clippers are kind of like a slow-footed team with no real rim protection. So, of course, they're going to look really good against that type of team. But I do think, in general, the style of play is more Warriors-like than it's been all season. Other than the very beginning of the season. But even then, they were just playing really, really slow and just winning grinded out game. But yeah, I got a good feeling. I mean, they can get a feel good win against Portland, right? Blow them out the water, and then with some momentum going into OKC, then you got 4 days off or 3 days off until you play Phoenix. So they got some regrouping time.
And Phoenix
but,
and the
IST.
Yeah.
OKC's not. Oh yeah, OKC did make it, right?
I think OKC might be in it too.
I think they.
But Phoenix is a wild card. I know that.
Okay, yeah, I think OKC didn't. That's why they added Portland and OKC to the in-season tournament week to the Warriors schedule because they didn't make it. But
okay,
they are a very good team this year, 2nd in the West.
Well, yeah, because the first in-season tournament game for the Warriors was against OKC and they beat them. So that was one loss they had.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. So yeah, so I mean, whatever, bro. Let's look ahead. Let's look ahead. Like to me, it's like I still believe the Warriors have the capacity to win it all, and the talent, but they have to get into a position where they have decent seating, you know, and like the winning has to start.
Yeah,
It
I
has to
agree.
start. Like you don't want to be in a play-in spot. I think you really forfeited already being like
A top seed.
a top 3 seed. You know, maybe you can get the 4th seed.
Yeah, let me look at the standings. But I mean, they are 4.5 games behind the 2nd seed. It's possible. They got to go on a crazy run though. Like they got to go on one of those, like at the end of 2021, win 15 out of 20, beginning of
They're not even in the
2022.
top 10 right now, bro.
Yeah, they aren't. They aren't. But I do think they can make up some ground.
Mavericks were off to a hot start to begin, and now they're only 3 games over 500.
Yeah, see what I'm saying? Like these teams are going to start losing. It's just a matter of the Warriors just can't drop games that they have in the bag.
I don't know. Denver is starting to lose at a higher clip. So this is
But
why I'm right, but I'm using that as an example to tell people I'm just like, y'all telling me the teams always find a way to win, but I said Denver's losing at a higher clip. They're still winning games. I said, but they're losing more games than they were, right? Like it's because they're down a key guy. Like that's what happens. It's not the same when you're missing a key guy.
yeah, it is definitely not.
There are 3 games, well, only technically 2, because the Timberwolves only have 1 more win than the Nuggets, but they're 3 games behind the Timberwolves in the loss column.
Yeah, facts. They racked up some losses that they probably wouldn't have if they had Jamal. So that can happen to a lot of these teams. So I'm not writing the Warriors off from being
Warriors
able to
can get in
climb
the
up.
top 6. I don't know if that they can finish 4 because I think, I mean, obviously the Kings, you know, with them to me, it's like an injury kind of thing. They can't afford to lose like a De'Aaron Fox, but I don't think they're gonna like go on any kind of crazy losing streak. And to me, the Suns, it's the same thing with them with their health because Devin Booker, you know, I just don't see those teams dropping a lot of games. The Mavs, I never believed in, so I think that they can drop more games, and the Lakers can drop more games, and like all those teams from 6 through. But I think, you know, to me, the Suns, they might experience injuries, and I'm not wishing for that, but they could. Like, to me, they're a team you got to be mindful for with injuries, and same thing for the Kings, you know? So it's just like, but I don't see the Kings like dropping, like having a crazy, like losing streak.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a matter of those teams having a crazy losing streak. It's more so I think the Warriors could end up just winning a ton of games in a short period of time. You know what I mean? Where it's like double digit wins and like under 5 losses over a certain stretch. That in itself, like other teams can just continue at their current pace and still get caught up by the Warriors if they do that, you know?
Right.
Um, that's the path. It's going to have to be the path because, like you said, none of those teams are going to go on a crazy losing streak unless something major happens, which is not likely. So they just got to start piling up wins, which is I think it's possible. I mean, I think I think overall, when I look at the team on paper and just what I've seen so far, I feel like the foundation for a really good team is there.
It's there. I agree.
They have to be mostly healthy. I don't think they have to have every single player available, but they have to be mostly healthy. Stay true.
I think they need Steph and Draymond. Like,
yeah,
and I do believe that they can win games without Draymond. But you know, the point that I wanted to make is that because I like you've said this and someone was in my mentions and I had meant to reply and I didn't, but they were like, you know, Steph is gassed and he needs more help offensively. Yes, but Steph isn't just gassed because of the offense. He's gassed for a few reasons. He's gassed because they're down guys, and so he's also having to do more on defense,
Mm-hmm.
right, to help cover. He's also being played a certain way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a few things, and like that's why missing the bodies does ultimately wear, on you, because and then it's like now you're putting Clay on people where I'm not saying that Clay's even doing that bad of a job, but it's just like Wiggins would probably be better on those players, right? And when you're shifting everybody a little bit out of their positions, that it all has an effect. It's not like it's over time, but it does have an effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as simple as, oh, they just, they need more. Like they actually are getting the offense. They're getting it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think
Dario's giving you offense, but like you always point out, he's giving it up on defense.
exactly.
And the
So
thing
they,
about it, when you're missing key defensive players, right? Like when I'm talking about Andrew, I'm not even talking about him for his offense. I'm saying
right.
for defense.
Yeah. His main
Because
role
you're down a GP2, you're down Andrew. So now that weakens your defense.
right. Undoubtedly. There's no question.
Which then makes you have to do more on offense because you're not. I mean, like you have players that you can put in like Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, but it weakens your defense.
Yeah. So yeah, I think ultimately they'll be fine in the grand scheme as far as the regular season.
They gotta
When it
be top
comes to
6. They gotta get a top 6 spot.
yeah,
That
I think
has
they'll
to
get
be
it. And I mean, I think ultimately when it comes to the playoffs, they probably do. They need to fill that role of that other creator somehow, right? Like you made a good point earlier. You said like 2015, 2016, they didn't really have it, right? But I also just feel like at that time period in the league, they didn't need it as much as they would possibly need it now, just because all the other contenders now are built to kind of guard the Warriors in that way. Like they're built to kind of take the motion off and stuff away. So it turns into Steph high pick and roll, you know what I mean? And if the way he did it against Boston, it's like, okay, like that's all we needed, right? Um, but I do think just to take the burden off of him, that would help to just have somebody that's you can just throw the ball to and say, look, you don't need to come off a screen and nothing like that. You can just take your own man and score or create some type of advantage. But
Where are
other
they
than
getting
that,
that from?
hmm,
Where are they getting that from? I know you're saying trade, but I just
it could be available via trade. I mean, if it's not, it has to be some combination of Chris Paul and Jonathan Kuminga. It has to be somewhere in the roster where it's like the motion offense stuff ain't working. We know Steph can get his own bucket. Somebody else got to be able to at least get a bucket for somebody for another teammate or for themselves late in the games against these other talented teams, because these other teams are going to have 2-3 guys that can do it. And I think it's just an advantage that they are, or it's a disadvantage if they can't get that. Right? It's a risky disadvantage if they can't get that, and you're just banking a lot on Steph being Superman.
no,
And
for real. And look, we've always talked about that. I'm just like, y'all talking all this shit about Jordan, but you're gonna miss him on some level. It's like,
mm,
and like I made the point to someone too. I was like, look, Jordan wasn't, because someone's like, this is why I trained Jordan Poole. And I'm like, look, Jordan wasn't the level. Well, at least last year, he wasn't playing like that anyway. So
mhm.
not in the playoffs, but we know that he does have the ability to do that. And I'm just saying that was always like, okay, you're giving that up with Jordan, and you did make the bench better, but then you're back to a situation where you don't have another person like that.
Right. And I mean, it's supposed to be Chris Paul, which is like, okay, if this is Chris Paul from like 2 years ago, for sure. But even if it's Chris Paul from 2 years
But are they
ago,
relying on him creating for himself or just creating for others?
well, if it's Chris Paul from 2 years ago, he could do both. But now it's more so like he's just like a facilitator. Now he doesn't even want to shoot as much anymore. But even if he was the guy who can hit his own shot and create for others, you're giving up something on the other end with just the size dynamic, right?
Right.
Like he's a good defender for his size, but it's ultimately you need it can help to have more players that are 6'6" and above, against all these bigger teams. You're just running a risk when you're doing it with those guys. So you hope Jonathan Kuminga could develop into somebody who can just bail out
I don't
offense,
see that
you know,
happening this
but we don't
year.
see that happening, right? So it's like,
I don't see that
where do you
happening
get
this
it from?
year. But I feel
Yeah,
like if you try to like bring in someone now for a trade, I just don't see that all falling in line because to me that's a key guy. It's not like some
for sure.
it's not like oh, it's good you kind of have this guy coming off the bench and
Mhm.
it's not
You
like
have to shake everything up. Yeah,
it's not
you
like
have
a
to shake
what's the guy? Reggie over in um on the
Denver,
Nuggets.
Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, like someone like a Reggie Jackson is like, okay, like he's coming off their bench, but you see how they've thrown him into the starting lineup and he's had like, like
Mhm.
someone like that's a little different. He's a vet coming off
Yeah,
the bench, but that would even something like, but they're not getting a guy like that. Any of the trades we're talking about, or at least that I've heard passed up, that's a major
you're bringing in a
change.
starter. Yeah, you're bringing
Yeah,
in a starter, and you're bringing in someone who immediately leaps to like second in the hierarchy on offense.
right.
Like that's a huge change.
And that's a
But I mean,
lot of like egos. Like that to me, that's just not something you can do midseason with this team.
yeah, and it could be something where it's like, all right, like the Wiggins trade, we did it mid-season. It didn't mean anything for that season, but it might mean something for next, which is like, damn,
But I
another
feel
loss.
like you do that when you're giving up hope of winning this season.
Maybe, maybe, but
I
I mean,
don't
like
think
I
you
said,
do it
it's
in the
risk
season when you have a chance. And I feel like at this point, they don't have the ability to throw away Steph seasons. They've already done that like more than once already.
for sure. I mean, I think there's risk associated with everything, but once you get to the trade deadline, you look, you say, well, are we eighth right now? Are we, where are we in the standings? How are we playing? Are we trending up towards what we're supposed to be looking like with this specific roster? If those answers are no, then you got to definitely got to take a
Agreed.
long look at that.
Agreed. If they're still meddling like this,
Yeah, then
then
it's like,
yes.
yeah, we probably don't got it this season unless we probably just don't got it this season. So let's just get ready for the next season, or at least just go forward with a move that can set us up for the rest of the season to change, or next season, something like that. So, and I do think when you look up and down this roster with the depth that they have at every position or most position, like if you trade, let's say X, Y, and Z player, you have another player behind that guy that can reasonably fill in for the role of whoever goes out, right? Like we can all agree Draymond is pretty irreplaceable. Steph is Steph, but beyond that, I feel like Clay is in that category as well, but a lot of other people don't. But beyond those guys, everybody on this
But
roster
even if
kind of
Clay is
be
irreplaceable in terms of like his own gravity and spacing that he provides, I still feel okay if you put Moody behind Clay. Not like as
I mean,
good.
yeah, depending on who the guy that you bring in is, right? I mean,
But I
I
mean, even
typically
like right
agree.
now, like if there's a game that Clay can't play or something and they give Moody the
Yeah,
start, that's what I'm saying when you say someone behind them. That's all.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for
I
sure.
feel like there's not even it's not the same levels. I want to be clear. It's not the same levels, Clay, but I just feel like there's no one you can offer behind Steph or Dre. Like I feel like those two,
Right,
there's just no one.
absolutely no one. Yeah, absolutely no one. I mean, you might even kind of throw Dario in there because he's the only big that can shoot, but obviously you can just find, depending on who you bring in, if you bring in a big that can shoot, now Dario becomes less valuable as far as like the scarcity of his skill set on the roster. But yeah, so knowing that you have a bunch of guys who can do a lot of the same things or at least approximate the same value, it makes you a little bit more, I wouldn't say a little bit more secure in the fact that you can bring in a new guy and still not miss, or at least not, you know, have a void left by the guys you send out, depending on who they are. So I think this is why they brought Chris Paul in. A part of the reason, I mean, Steph and those guys wanted him, but also his contract is very tradable, and this you can pivot off of it at any moment, and it doesn't affect you long term. And a lot of teams might find it attractive because it's expiring and all this type of stuff. So that's always been an option for them, and I think it just might have to continue to be an option. Like they got to keep their options open.
I just don't see some of these trades where people talking about Wiggins to Toronto. I don't think. Yeah, and I don't think Masai's doing that. I think the only player that the Warriors have who Masai would even be remotely interested in is Jonathan Kuminga.
Right. I mean, Wiggins makes $24 million. So most of the trades for the guys that they would need to fill this void are not making $24 million. And his contract plus Kuminga's contract is only like 30. So those guys aren't really making 30. You know what I mean? Like Markkanen is making 18. He's a guy that if they got Markkanen, I would feel very confident in them being a championship team either this season or next season. But I don't think Wiggins is the piece that you need to move in these scenarios because the role that he fills, you know, the team is just better if you keep Wiggins, if that makes sense.
So
like,
who is it?
I mean, it has to be CP3, the contract of $30 million.
Right, we know that, but the young players they have that teams would be interested in are, I still think, even though as well as Moody is playing, I think more teams would be interested in Jonathan Kuminga still.
For sure. And it has to be Jonathan. I mean, like, love Jonathan. I think he's been misused, and I think it's unfortunate the way that his career has gone so far as like the development.
Right, but I'm just saying, is that enough? Like, I don't think like you're like CP3, people were taking that because it's an expiring, but like is Jonathan Kuminga and a CP3 expiring enough to get you the player that you need?
You got to throw in picks. You got to throw in first rounders.
They got first rounders to throw in?
Yeah, they got them. I think there's a cap to how many they can throw in. I think they can throw in a maximum of 2, maybe 3. But if you throw a distant first rounder out there, it might be valuable. Teams might say, okay, in 4 years, Steph's going to be, I don't know, 39. That first round pick is pretty valuable, right? Because the Warriors are probably going to not be that good around that time. So if you throw that in along with a guy who can immediately help rebuild whatever you want to rebuild, like Jonathan, and then you have a contract that you can just do away with Chris Paul, I think it's pretty attractive package, but it's a matter of if those teams think it's attractive and if other teams have a better offer than the Warriors offer. So I don't know. I mean, I would be all in on the Utah thing. I would be all in on Lauri Markkanen. I wanted him this summer. I wanted
KP. Him? Has his name been?
I mean, I think I saw some type of rumors about like the Jazz aren't going anywhere, so they might just try to pivot off of the big contract guys and just go complete rebuild. Also, Lauri Markkanen is dead in the middle of his prime. Like, I don't think he wants to waste away on the Jazz. So he could become available. He only makes $18 million, but he only makes $18 million next year as well, which would be like a huge contract. Like, he's well above that contract. Like, he's closer to $40 million player. Which will probably be much easier to help you re-sign Klay at a number that makes sense and stay under the second apron. So I'll be all in on Markkanen. The whole Toronto thing, who knows what Masai Ujiri's going to ask for Siakam or something like that. But I think he's another player that would put them dead center in contention, like legit title contention for this year and next year. So it's just a matter of what do they look like at the trade deadline? It's from a record standpoint, from a performance standpoint, and you know, like how available are those guys at that point in time?
Right. All right. Well, there you have it, guys. We recapped, told you what we think, looked ahead. They play their next game on what day versus Portland? Wednesday?
Wednesday. They got a long time to get it right.
Yeah. So until next time, guys, we appreciate you tuning in with us. Make sure you are subscribed to Golden Spaces. Make sure you are following us on Twitter and Instagram at Golden Spaces Pod. You can find us under 95.7 The Game's YouTube channel. You should be subscribed to them as well, so that way you get the notifications when we drop a new episode. Leave us a positive review. Leave us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you so much. Take care.